Hey, everybody. I am Dr. Andy Roark, and this is the Uncharted Podcast. Guys, we got a really good one today. It's sort of a heavy episode, but we keep things positive and focused on what can we actually do? How can we make our situation in the world better? But this is about veterinarians who don't agree on possible animal neglect. We have a writer who writes in to say that she owns a house call practice and she has an associate vet, and the associate vet went out to a underserved community. She was called out for a euthanasia, and she saw other pets that were housed there in a way that she thought was animal neglect. And so she called animal control, and the practice owner is thinking, we know that these people have never called a vet before, and we know that this area is slow in uptaking vet services. And the owner is concerned that calling animal control might damage the ability to get other people in the area to use veterinary services and to reach out for veterinary care at all. And so these two vets don't agree on what should have happened or what the appropriate action steps should be in this specific area when they see animals that are being possibly neglected or living in conditions that the vets don't think are appropriate. And so anyway, it's a very interesting question. It's got a lot of philosophy around it. It's got a lot around what does your state law say? We really get into it and sort of talk about moral disagreements and when people have ethical disagreements in the practice, how do you approach those things and what's important? And I think it's a really good episode. So I think you guys are going to like this a lot. Let's get into it.
And now, the Uncharted Podcast.
And we are back. It's me, Dr. Andy Roark, and the one and only Stephanie with fingernails that shine like Justice Goss. I told you, I'm on a cake kick. Like, I've been listening to a lot of cake recently.
Well, I mean, I feel like now I have to go and I'm like looking at my nails, which are not in their summer finest. And I feel like that just gives me an excuse to go get my nails done.
I want a Stephanie Goss with a short skirt and a long jacket. I love that song. It reminds me of my wife, I tell you. It's like she's touring the facility and picking up slack. I'm like, that's my wife.
I love it.
I love it. But yeah, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Holy cripes. I am the world's moving fast. It's a mixed bag, I got to tell you. It's a mixed bag. Yeah. My oldest daughter went to youth nationals for Olympic weightlifting last week.
That's
in Colorado.
Awesome. This is her second year, right? Second or third?
Her fourth year. She's gone every year in high school.
Okay.
Yeah. She's 17. It's the last year in youth nationals. And she said when she went, she was like, I think I'm probably like, I think she's done competing after this. She was like, hey, I love my oldest daughter, but I don't totally understand her, and I never have. Like, if there's something that I was good enough to go to youth nationals in, I would cling to it. Like, I would be like, this is my thing. She's just phenomenally good. But it's interesting. Once they hit about 17, once they hit about 14, 15, you start seeing some of the kids are like, this is my identity. Yes. And Jacqueline's like drawing costume designs. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, I'm a theater kid. I just happen to be really good at Olympic weightlifting. And so anyway, but she went, and I watched it on a live stream. So my wife took her, and Stephanie, she crushed it.
Of course she did.
Like, she absolutely, she got a personal record on her clean and jerk and personal record on her overall performance. And she came home and she's like, maybe I'm not quite done competing yet. But she
maybe I've got a little bit of the bug left in me.
Yeah, totally. I think it was for that. I think part of it I think this is true about life is in Olympic weightlifting, it is a very individual sport, meaning it's you going and doing a hard thing and by yourself. And even if there's other people there, they can't help you lift the weight over your head. Like, you have to do it. And so it is a individual sport. And it's probably pretty lonely, in that sort of way. And so I think that she has, worked really, really, really hard for a long time in the basement by herself, largely. Right. And she was like, this sucks. And then she goes, and I think when you get to see what you have accomplished and how hard you have worked, suddenly you're like, oh, I have done this. I think the challenge in vet medicine is there's so many of us who are working every day but there is no meet where we get to go and say, look at what I have built. Look at what I have made. Look at this hard work paying off. I think that's really challenging. It's not like we're a bunch of actors and one year you're going to win an Oscar and be like, I made it. It all paid off. Like, there's nothing like that that's coming. And I think that's a challenging part of life, is finding that validation when you work hard day after day. And so, but it was interesting watching her get that, and then also thinking, I understand, I think, why she felt that way. What is the award that comes for veterinarians, you know?
Well, and I think that's why for a lot of us, like, we have to, no one is going to tell you you're doing a great job, right? Like, there's always someone, I have had this conversation with the team, like, there's always a client who we're not going to be able to help, or we're not going to be able to take care of. And if we focus on the disappointments, you know, we'll be real sad. Because to your point, nobody is going to come along and be like, you know, but Mrs. Jones gave you a glowing 5-star review. And like, I think we have to figure out amongst ourselves. And that's one of the things that I love about our Uncharted community so much, is that we have created all of these different ways to hold the trophy, because for ourselves, but also for our team, because you know, like, that's just it. Like, our jobs are hard, you know, we see hard things every day. And I've been thinking about this a lot, because I've been doing work with a hospital that is a nonprofit and in a very large urban area, and works with a lot of impoverished and houseless clients. And so I've been thinking about veterinary medicine from a very different perspective. And we have a mailbag actually that came through, and I'm pretty excited to talk about this, because I think that no one is going to create those opportunities for our teams to, like, hold the trophy. And I think it's really hard too sometimes when we're facing cases where thinking about our mailbag writer, like, you feel like maybe you didn't win, but you're not sure how to define what win even means. And I think that's, for me, that's a lot of today's episode. But I think for our teams, like, to your point, there is no Oscars. You know, it'd be great if there was, but, like, we have to make that, and we have to say, what are the things we're going to celebrate? You know, are we going to celebrate the days where we, you know, are able to help people, where we are able to, you know, provide a care grant so that someone gets a surgery that they need, or we go a day without, you know, a euthanasia? Like, sometimes those things are things that we don't think about celebrating, but are still really worth celebrating. And it's up to us as teams to create those moments.
Yep. I completely agree. I think that's a great way to think about it, is just, how do we make that celebration for other people? And how do you make it authentic? You know, you and I had talked before. We always used to laugh about the Employee of the Month award.
Because it goes to Andy every month, unless it goes to Skipper.
So we have an Employee of the Month award at Uncharted, and I give it to myself every month.
Except for Tyler.
And he was
one time.
Every now and then, somebody else will get it. But when they get it, it's a huge deal. It's happened like once a year, it will go to someone who's not me, and everybody loses their mind. And I do it as a joke, because I think it's hilarious for the boss to give himself Employee of the Month every year, or every month. And I do it as a joke. But in all seriousness, I've said this before, when someone else gets it, it's a big deal. Like, we all laugh. But everybody goes bananas when it goes to somebody else. And it's so dumb, but we have actually made it into something where it means something to people. And I don't like Employee of the Month programs for most practices, because very quickly it becomes this thing where everybody gets it's a popularity contest,
everybody gets an award.
At some point everybody gets the trophy. It becomes a participation trophy. Exactly.
I do want it noted for the record that I neither won the popularity contest or got the participation trophy, because I have never once been Employee of the Month at Uncharted Vet. So I do want it noted. And now I no longer work there, so I will never get Employee of the Month.
I was going to say, now that you're the CEO at Pride, it's like the chances of getting Employee of the Month at Uncharted are real low.
To none.
Real low. Slim to
Well,
none.
listen.
It'd be like a posthumous award. Like she didn't work here anymore. Yeah, but she had a good month, and so.
Well, we've got a mailbag that is a little bit different this month, but also not so different.
Yeah.
And we had a leader who is a practice owner reach out. They have a house call practice, and so they're seeing clients in their homes, and they had a situation which has led to a broader discussion because they had one of their associate vets that went out to do a house call euthanasia, and the associate felt like the situation warranted a neglect report to animal control. And so We'll get into some of the specifics kind of when we talk about it. But basically the associate came back and listed all of their concerns for this practice owner and said, these are the things that I'm seeing in the environment, in the home, in the pet itself. And this is why I feel like this is a neglect case. And the practice owner listened, didn't obviously have their own observations because they weren't there at the house call, but listened to what this associate vet said and said, I'm not so sure that it's clear cut. And I think at its heart, that's a lot of what this mailbag is about, is that there's a lot of things in veterinary medicine that fall in the gray zone. And my team hates it because they usually will ask me a question and almost always my answer starts with, it depends. Because so much of what we do in veterinary medicine falls into the gray. And I think for this practice owner, that is how they felt about this case. And so their perception was, I think that we should probably provide some support and some resources and some education before we maybe make a move to reporting neglect in this case. And so the associate and the practice owner were at disagreement. And despite that disagreement, the associate reported the case and animal control visited the home and ultimately weren't able to speak to the pet owners, but so no action was actually taken. But this practice owner kind of took a minute to step back and kind of look at it from a bigger picture because they said, I would really like to have a policy and a protocol and some processes because this, for me, brought up a lack of those in the practice in this area because I would love for the team to know this is when you take action and when you don't. But I also would like the team to feel like we have some agreed upon compass in terms of how we judge and the way in which we look at these cases. And so they said, ultimately, it was a client who called us to euthanize a patient with a terminal condition. And so that was able to be met. And is that where our responsibility ends? Do we have responsibility to the other pets that may still be in that home environment that may be in conditions that are neglectful? And so they said, I'm struggling to find a policy that everybody can agree to. And this case is a really great example because my associate and I completely disagreed about it. And they were wondering, how do I go about setting guidelines that balance the compassion for the animals and also their owners, but also help maintain consistency across the team and the way in which we approach cases like this.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting. There's a lot going on here. And so let me start. Before you even get to headspace, I want to sort of summarize the argument on both sides here. And so we have it's a house call practice, and we've got the vet who says, I saw conditions like animals outside in the yard without shelter or things like that. And again, I'm not exactly sure what the conditions were, but I saw conditions that were neglect in my eyes, right? I believe they rise to that. And the appropriate action to take when we see animal abuse or animal neglect is we need to report it to the authorities. And that's what needs to happen. And that's what the vet says. And the other vet who wrote to us is the right of the practice owner, Stephanie. It's the practice owner. The practice owner is taking a more philosophical look at it, which I do appreciate. And the idea is that sometimes we work with people who have never seen a vet before. And they serve an area that is where that's likely the case. This is an area where there's not a lot of health care for pets. And the fact that the only reason we know about these animals' condition is because they actually called the house called vet and they reached out for help. And so if they reach out for help, which is rare, and we go there and then we call animal control on them, are they ever going to reach out for help again? are we going to be able to change a culture around don't call the vet, it ain't worth it. And that's her concern. And so I think that both of these conditions make sense. I actually talked about this mailbag question with my wife when we were driving, and she said, "What's on your mind?" And I thought, well, I'll blow your doors off. And I told her, I was like, actually. This. And now my wife and I are very different people, and I love her to pieces, but it was really great because I think my wife and I very much mirror the personality types of the people involved in this exact conflict. And so anyway, I'll get back to that in a second. But those are the two sides of the argument as I see them. Stephanie, did that based on the reading of what was sent to us, that kind of lines up for you, right? Okay. Now, in order to start this, and my wife really hit on this right away, but I think it's true, there's legality around animal abuse and animal neglect. And so the first thing I have to say at the beginning is animal abuse and animal neglect are handled at the state level, which means we should all actually be familiar with what the state position is and definition is on what constitutes abuse. Is maybe a little easier. Neglect is harder. And so again, and it's going to vary. It varies with the state. So what rises to the level of animal neglect in, say, California and what it rises to in, say, Mississippi, there's maybe very different things. So I looked at it for the state of South Carolina, where I am. And, it came up with this idea of, deprivation of necessary sustenance or shelter is a big part of neglect / abuse, right? And for the shelter, it says shelter must protect the animal from physical suffering or impairment of health. And so that's kind of how it's said. Now, when you hear that, it is subjective. You know what I mean? Like, it must have acceptable shelter and protect them from physical suffering. I think about all the dogs. So it's 100 degrees in South Carolina right now. I was just
going to say, like, especially someone coming from the West Coast where we don't have the humidity. Like, my perception of potential suffering for a patient in South Carolina, where you have humidity every day, may be radically different than your perception living there and dealing with it all the time.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And also, like, say it's 100 degrees and you've got a dog that's outside and it's tied up and it's got a dog house. Is that right. Is that not physical suffering? I mean, that seems pretty brutal to me in those like 10 roof dog houses. Like, but again, it is subjective. And so anyway, I think that that's challenging, but I want to put that in at the beginning to say what makes this argument hard is there's not a definition you can look up and say, there are the water bowl is not within 12 feet of this, therefore it's neglect. There's nothing like that. And so it's going to be a little bit nebulous. And the last thing is, in some states, veterinarians are mandatory reporters of animal abuse or neglect. And so if you're a mandatory reporter, that means there is no question. If you see it and you're like, that's neglect, then you are obligated to report what you saw, if you believe that is neglect.
And there's two additional pieces to both of what you just said. The first piece, so I think I agree with you 100% that neglect is nuanced, right? Like there are so many variables. And the second half of that for me is it's also contextual. Like context matters when we're especially when we're talking about economic hardship, systemic barriers, access to care. Those things do matter. So they add to the nuance even more than the gray that you said about the state, the rules being different in different places, right?
You're totally right. I'll just throw this in for South Carolina. Part of the wording is knowingly or intentionally, causing or leading to blank, and I go knowingly or intentionally. And again, I'm not trying to come down on either side of this. I hope everybody can sort of see what I'm doing. Yeah. It's
the gray zone. And the second piece to the part about veterinary professionals is, yes, we're veterinary professionals and we took an oath to do no harm and we want to end suffering where we see it, right? And the flip side to that is we're veterinary professionals. We're not law enforcement. It is our job to be reporters, to your point, but it is our job to advocate for the patients and animals while also building trust, to your point, and creating a space where clients feel safe accessing care. And we have to recognize that reporting can carry unintended consequences, particularly for clients and families that maybe do have the context of the first, where there is significant economic hardship, where there is systemic barriers, where there is not easy access to care. And so I think that it is one of those things that is very much in the gray zone. And I think for me, part of wrapping my brain around this headspace wise, like I said, I've been working in a clinic that has had me thinking about this a lot over the last 6 months. And one of the biggest things for me in terms of coming up with feeling okay and feeling like I still did a good job at the end of the day was coming to the place to recognize that two things can be true at the same time. And that just wrapping my brain around the fact that the family's intention, the pet parents' intentions might not be malicious, but there can still be impact on that patient, right? Which is how this associate was viewing it. They were like, well, they may not have meant to, but I feel like this pet was still suffering as a result. Both of those, and therefore it warranted my concern. Both of those two things can be true at the same time.
So from a headspace standpoint, because I think you're right, and I think we've established pretty well that there's a lot of sort of subjectivity and shades of gray around this. From a headspace standpoint, the first thing I thought about when I looked at this was a book called The Righteous Mind, which I read years ago. It's by this guy named Jonathan Haidt, who also wrote, his new book is called The Anxious Generation, which is about smartphones and kids. But The Righteous Mind was one of the most impactful books that I've read in my life. It's one of the most useful. And the whole book is about how people make moral decisions. So, ethical choices. And so in the book, Haidt comes up with this idea, and he says that there's 6 different criteria that people kind of use to make moral choices. And different people prioritize these differently. And not everybody leans into all 6, but there's kind of 6 big ones. And so the first one he talks about is care/harm. These are the people who are like, what, am I providing care? Am I providing harm? Are these people hurt? Are they being treated compassionately? Like that compassion versus harm is a big deal for them. The second one is justice, right? Which is about fairness. Are people cheating? Are they being treated fairly? The third one is about in-group, out-group loyalty. Are you are you supporting your team or are you not supporting your team? The fourth one is hierarchy. So some people believe in, say, like you'll hear God, country, family in that order. And you say, well, I'm putting my family above, above religion. And other people have a real problem with that. Like there's a hierarchy. Employees are respectful to their employer, whatever that is. Students are respectful to their teacher. That's hierarchy. And then there's sanctity or purity and degradation. This is about how people feel. Does something seem pure? Does it seem dignified? Things like that. Think of like thoughts around like premarital sex. Like some people are like, nope, that's not pure. That's not what we do. And other people go, that's not a thing for me. Like that's not an issue that I have. And then the last one is around oppression and liberty, which is like, is this person being oppressed? Do they have the freedom to make choices? That's a big deal for those people. Anyway, so I lay these things down because I see 2 of these decision-making matrices in place between these 2 veterinarians. Your first doctor, the one who was like, I see it, I'm calling them, that's it. That is a justice mindset. They're like, this is like, these are the rules. They have broken the rules. That these pets are not being treated fairly. We are calling the cops. Justice, fairness, bam. The other vet is the care/harm person who says, but are we being compassionate to the people? They don't know better. Are we damaging our ability to help them in the future? Are we damaging our ability to help this community? And bam. Neither is necessarily right or wrong. Where you come down on this issue, in my mind, probably depends on which of those 2 decision drivers you tend to prioritize. And so my wife would tell you, she has a justice mindset. She, like, in her mind, there's a right and a wrong, and there are rules, and the rules are made to be followed. And like what does the state say? What constitutes negligence? Then that, and there is no question. This is, we are justice, following the rules. This is what has to happen. Protecting the animals. Bam. And when I say, but what about, this community and the behaviors of the future and the ability to affect real change going forward, she's like, I don't want to hear any of that. I'm not interested in that, Andy. Like, these are the rules. Yep. This is it. And so I think that's fascinating, but I want to kind of lay that down in headspace of, it's not hard to see how people will kind of make those choices. Neither is right or wrong. They're just different.
And I think the last thing, I totally agree with all of that. And I think the last thing that I would add on to that from a headspace perspective is that it's important to recognize that this owner is coming at it from a place of wanting to support the cohesion, the mental health of the team, the taking care of the clients, like they want consistency. And I can appreciate that. And I also think that this is a sticky situation because it's not just about, to your point, it's not just about the letter of the law, right? It's about your practice's identity. It's about your identity as a practice owner, how you show up in your community, what you're there for, what you believe in, not just as an individual, but also as a group, because this is an instance where one person's actions have the ripple effect across the group. And so I think from a headspace perspective, it's going to be really important to recognize that having conversation about it should be a part of the problem solving when we get to the action steps here in just a minute.
Yeah. So I got a couple more quick things here. So we're going to start, we've been philosophical here, but now it's time to start getting down into the nitty gritty. The second point for me in headspace is, you can't punish or penalize a vet for reporting what they perceive as abuse or neglect. Like, agreed. That's it. You can't you can disagree with them and you can try to talk to them about it. I agree, 100%. But just to be clear, like, if a vet thinks that they saw abuse and they reported it, you just, that's it. That you can disagree with them. You cannot negative. The optics are terrible. It's going to be a potentially a really,
because that's a behavior
experience for them
that you want to reward, right? Is your vets looking out for their patients. And ultimately at the heart of it, like, that's what they did, was look out for their patient. And so you want to appreciate that, even if you might disagree with the way that they did it.
Exactly right. And so I think that we got to lay that down from a headspace too and go, worth the conversation, but like, that's it. Don't make this about what is already done. This is, they made the call, they called animal control, animal control went out there. This is done. And you arguing about what should have happened a month ago, 2 weeks ago,
doesn't help.
There's no point. It's done. It's over. All you're going to do is build resentment or make this person feel criticized and just it's not you. Like, we can talk more about this and we will, but it cannot be a revisiting of what happened in the past, right? And then my last question would be, I understand being upset, and I understand, like we talked about the two sides, and the side that said, I'm reporting them, they got their way because they're the one who saw it, they did it, and it's done. And so I understand the other side going, that's not it. Does this happen enough to justify
making a big deal
making a solution to this problem? I mean, really, if this happens once every 5 years, is it worth the pain or the headache or the work that's going to be involved in trying to create some sort of system or program to make this go differently? And again, if it happens once every 5-10 years,
is it worth
I might say I would try to talk to them, and then I might go on, because getting vets on board with another idea or program, that might be a fairly significant lift. And you have to kind of decide, do you want to spend your leadership capital, your relationship capital to make this happen? And if you said this happens a couple of times a year and it's a real problem, I go, okay, well, then we'll wade into it. But sometimes we get really mad about a choice that someone else made, and they're not wrong, but we really hate that choice. Again, if it's a once a decade decision, I'm not confident that it's going to be worth the political capital
Yeah.
that it takes to fix it. So that's sort of my headspace stuff. Have you got anything else there?
No. You want to take a break and then we can talk about action steps?
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So for action steps, I sort of laid one of these out at the very beginning. If you're having this thought and you're this practice owner, I think you have to start with very good clarity on what does the state law
the legal
define as animal neglect, and like let's get that out. Let's dust it off. This is maybe one where I would not take ChatGPT at their word. I would ask them how to find this, and then I would go actually look at what it says. But I would be knowledgeable about what is the law around neglect, full stop. And then, are veterinarians mandatory reporters?
Yes.
Because if they are mandatory reporters, then that's the end of the conversation. Like that's it.
The third piece that I would, the only other thing that I would add to that, because I agree with you, that's my action step 2, like knowing what has to be reported versus what's discretionary, mandatory, not. All of those things are totally true. The last thing I would say is if your neglect stuff is in state law, also look at your state practice act as a veterinarian, not only about what is required to be reported, but also in particular, this was a case around euthanasia. And so there was conversation about ending suffering. And so what does your practice act say, both about your abilities, but also about what may be required of you as a veterinarian or as a licensed support staff member? And then I think to that end, it's really important that the veterinarians have that training and understanding of what is legal, right? And what is required versus what is discretionary, but also the team as a whole. Because I think just being honest and open about it helps avoid some of that fear and the confusion. And a lot of times when these cases come up, to your point, it is more the once in a blue moon and everybody's super confused because nobody really has a lot of clarity because we haven't really looked at it and said, okay, we're going to train the team as a whole so everybody knows what we're supposed to know and what we're not.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Are you thinking like a presentation by animal control about what constitutes animal abuse?
Yeah. Or, just a sense of like, hey, these are the kind of circumstances where we want, especially if it's not mandatory, but it's more like discretionary. Yeah, what is animal control looking for? How can we be a good partner to them? But also how can we help serve our clients and our patients better?
Yeah. So I like that a lot. I would say we need to put this specific incident behind us, because otherwise it's going to feel like you're coming back around again and again to talk about this thing that the other vet did that you don't agree with. So you can frame these things in a positive way. This practice owner had said, we'd like to reach out to this community. We would like to provide resources to this community. What if you just didn't talk about neglect? What if instead you talked about an initiative that you want to provide resources to under-resourced areas that you serve? Yes. What if you just said, I want to start this thing to give back to our community. Yes. And these are the types of clients that I want to support. And this is how I want to support them. And you don't have to tell anybody that it came from this motivation to say, I saw this happen and it motivated me. Because again, I don't want to shame this veterinarian. I don't think you can criticize this person. And I don't think that what they did was wrong. It's just different from what, other people might do. And so this can be one of those cases. A lot of times we're motivated by things and we don't tell people what our motivators are. We just take action. And so this person, the practice owner had said, we'd like to work on information. We'd like to help them get resources for flea control in these areas. And I would say, what if you didn't tell anyone why you were doing it? You just started doing it and you rolled that out to the team and sort of said, this is how we want to give back. This is what we want to do for our area. Yeah. I think that you dodge a lot of pushback and a lot of he said, she said, and a lot of potential hurt feelings. And I think you just start doing something that's good in the world and talk about the good that you're trying to do. And so I think that that's not talking about future cases and focusing on the positive, I think is key. And the last part is, if you want to sort of talk about these things around neglect, I think it's important to start to have a conversation with the other veterinarians in your practice around what is possible in regards to this. And so, we talked about sort of your veterinarian with a justice mindset, and you have a care, sort of compassion mindset for the people who are there. What is the proposal that you have that will allow the justice veterinarian to feel that they are doing the right thing and that the pets are being taken care of and looked out for, and that lets you feel like you're doing a compassionate thing for those people, because you're going to have to check both of those boxes.
Right.
And until you can make the justice vet feel like they are doing what they are supposed to do and that the animals are being looked out for, I don't think they're going to agree with you. And I don't think it's about how you talk to them. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's about how you talk to them. I really don't. I think they have a worldview that is different from your worldview. And that's not bad. But I think that once you recognize that, and the reason I took the time to sort of lay out these moral drivers, if you know what those drivers are, you can make solutions that check those required boxes to make someone say, I feel okay about this now. And so I think that could be, I think it could be a lot of things. I think that there could be some sort of a review process of these cases. I think it could involve an external evaluator, meaning someone who doesn't work for your practice. Maybe they work for animal control. Maybe they're an animal activist or maybe there's someone who has a focus on sort of community activism in that area. But is there maybe it's a panel, maybe it's 3 people who would agree that if you guys have these things and you want our input, we'll tell you kind of what you think. But if the vets don't buy into that, then it's not going to work. But they have to agree, yes, if we had some sort of a evaluation process. And then I think the other thing for the justice mindset vets a lot is, if you don't take these people to animal control, what are you going to do? Right. And I think you're going to have to convince them that there's value in letting your team handle it before it gets escalated, and again, you have to have a proposal that's good enough to get them to buy into it. But I mean, you can think creatively, but I really do think it has a lot to do with what are the resources in your area? What do you have access to? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? What are the problems you're trying to avoid? But then I suspect that there will be people who would be willing to give you their time, especially if this happens not very often. I think that there's probably people who could help you, but you have to try to build that system or that protocol that meets your needs and the needs of the vets. And it can be challenging, but it's quite possible that it's going to be done. Although I do think there will always be a place where they're like, this is bad, I'm calling the authorities. And that should be how it is.
Well, so 2 things that I would add. One is, I think part of the action steps, I agree with you about not making them feel bad, because what has happened has already happened and you can't change that.
That's done.
And I would like to seek to understand what I have found. I'm thinking about 2 veterinarians, not so much necessarily neglect, and reporting, but incidents where their behavior or what their decision-making framework seemed different than it might normally, or seemed different from the rest of the group. And when I asked them questions, I found that their past experiences were shaping the way that they were acting tremendously. And so I think one of the things that can be really helpful is understanding, like, what are they afraid of? What past experiences might they have? And a lot of times, like, when you talk to veterinary professionals, like, at some point, if you practice long enough, you have a case go badly, or you have a board complaint, or there is something like that makes a lasting impact on you. And it might just be the case that you can't forget, where you wish you had done something different. I think trying to understand, like, is this driving them on a repeated pattern, or was this a one-off decision where you guys maybe disagreed, is important. Because I do think that as a practice owner, if they have values and the way that they want to support the community lines up with the legal precedent, right? And lines up with what is required, but they may have a differing of opinion with their associate vet. I do think that there exist worlds, to your point, where it happens more often than not, particularly when we're serving communities that are impoverished or under-resourced. If you feel strongly enough about it, you might have to face the fact that you might be on a different page than your associate. And if you want your practice policy to be, look, especially if you're meeting the legal requirements, you want a decision-making framework that says, we're going to assess the suffering, we're going to end the suffering if we can. We're going to consider the intention and the barriers. We're going to think about offering resources, all of the things that we've both talked about. If that's your process and you want your protocol to be that way, at the end of the day, it's your practice. And to your point, just as a veterinarian, you should respect the fact that your associate may feel differently and have to ask yourself the question of, can you make space for them to exist in your practice? Because this really truly is a one-off thing and we see it every once in a blue moon. Or are you in a case where it sounds like this practice might be, where you're seeing this day in and day out in terms of the family situation, and then you might have to have a different conversation with your associate about, this is the way that I would like our practice to approach these cases. How do you feel about that? Because it may be the case where you're on different pages and that right or wrong, good or bad, has consequences. You know, it may be okay because they may want to find a space where they feel matches their values and their goals and desires on how they handle cases like that. And it may not be your practice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're really right on. You have got to come with a solution. You have got to come with, you cannot say, hey, I really want you to not report this thing that you're pursuing.
And then not give them a plan. Yeah, absolutely.
And like that 100%. Can't happen. And so I think it's one of those situations where it really does force the issue. Like, can you make a plan? And, you know, and present it in a way that's persuasive. And it sounds like it's going to have to, it can't be hand waving. Like, it's going to have to be something that's real as far as how you're going to deal with these cases, you know, or review them, or what are you going to actually do? It's not, I don't think it's going to be a thing where you can say, why don't you just tell me and I'll figure out what to do? Like, I don't think that's going to fly. I think it's going to have to be bigger than that. And again, I'll go back to one of my earlier points, is just like, you do kind of have to figure out, is this the hill that you want to die on? Is this happening enough that you're like, I'm going to start this mission, I'm going to put forward these resources. And if you do, more power to you. Like, I think that's wonderful. I think it's really great. But also, I don't want to shame people who are a full-time practice owner working as a vet, doing everything they can, and they're like, I want to help these people, but I don't have the time to make a program. And it's like, I don't want that to bother. I don't want that to bother you. You know, it is. You know, sometimes these things, they suck. You know, and we want to keep working that direction. But I'm not going to tell someone you're obligated to come up with a social program that addresses this problem. I would love for you to, and I'd love for you to be passionate about that. But no one should guilt you into that. That should not be how this comes into being.
And I think the last thing that is both headspace and action step that I would add on to what you just said is that no matter what we do, no matter how hard we work, no matter what system or program we create, or even policies and protocols we write, there's nothing that is perfect, and there is nothing that is going to take away the discomfort when it comes to neglect cases, because the reality is, we are in this profession to ease the suffering of our patients. And so nothing you do, no policy you write, no program you put into place is going to completely be able to avoid that. And so I think being open and honest about that, and appealing to the, you know, sitting back and recognizing that your associate is acting from that place of trying to take care of their patients and give them the best possible care and the best possible life, even if that means ending their life by ending suffering, right? And so I think just keeping that in mind, especially when we start to talk about it as a team, is really, really healthy and important, because I think it can help temper the emotions that are probably always going to be present when we're talking about cases where the situation, the care, all of the above is less than ideal.
Yeah, I agree. Well, buddy, thanks for talking through this with me. I hope it's at least comforting for the person who wrote in. I love that they're thinking about this and they're trying to do good in the world. And it's a really hard place to be in. Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Thanks, gang. And that's what I got. Guys, thanks for being here. Yeah, because like I said, a little bit of a heavy episode. You know, animal neglect stuff is always, it's super sad. It can be upsetting. I want to help people. I want to continue to make care accessible to people who have maybe not reached out for care in the past. I think that's important. I want to help future generations of pets. And also, I can't in good conscience let animal neglect go on. And so, you know, it's really a balance of trying to figure out what's important and how do we handle this. But it's a hard question. I don't think it has a right answer. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing Stephanie and I kind of work through how we look at it. and kind of what choices we would sort of make if we were in the position of the practice owner. So guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. I'll talk to you later on.
And now, the Uncharted Podcast.